Hey folks, it's your friend Ashton, and welcome to the Rooted Rebellion podcast, the show that's reshaping the food system from the ground up. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rooted Rebellion podcast. As always, I am thrilled that you can join me here today. And I'm equally thrilled for the beautiful spring weather that we're experiencing, at least here in Kentucky. As we head into a new growing season, I know it's a particularly busy time for our folks who are involved in agriculture. And I know for all of us, we're starting to come back to life a little bit after the winter. I would love to hear how you are enjoying this changing season. So drop in the comments how you are welcoming in spring. Before we get into today's episode, I have a really exciting announcement. The Rooted Rebellion podcast is on Substack. Let me tell you what that means. You're going to have access to even more exclusive Rooted Rebellion content. That's going to include episode companion articles, additional interviews, and the chance to interact within the Rooted Rebellion community. Now, if you are already subscribed to our newsletter, I have good news for you. You are automatically included in the Substack community. For those of you who have yet to join, I'm going to include the link to our Substack publication in the show notes. And if you aren't familiar with the platform, no worries. It is so user-friendly, and each post will go directly to your inbox. So again, I will include the link to that Substack in today's show notes, and I cannot wait to see you there. We're joined today by a familiar face, Alexis Campestre, the founder of Orion Farmstead. First episode this season, I shared with you a little bit about my personal food journey. Today, Alexis is going to be doing the very same. Alexis was incredibly influential in forming my relationship with food. As you'll hear today, I had some of my earliest regenerative ag experiences with Alexis, and he continues to serve as a mentor in that role. He's going to share with you today how his relationship with food changed following the death of his father in his early childhood, and how food preparation helps him connect to his food source and to the people that he loves. Together, we'll also explore what Alexis considers necessary friction in food preparation and his daily life. I invite you to join me today as we chat with Alexis and learn more about the importance of slowing down and embracing inconvenience. Here to share his food journey is Alexis Campestre. Alexis, good morning, and thank you so much for joining me back here on the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's definitely one that's near and dear to my heart.
I agree. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, just because I think it's really important for us as a business to continually stay close to the personal experiences that have informed who we are and our values as Orion Farmstead, as well as this podcast. If you listened, you'll know that I shared my personal food journey and my evolving relationship with food. And today, Alexis is joining me to share his experience, and there's going to be some overlap as well. Alexis was incredibly formative in influencing my relationship with the local food systems. Today, you're going to hear more about Alexis's childhood and his early years with food, and just how that has come to form his own values as founder of Orion Farmstead. Alexis, thanks so much for joining me. Let's start at the beginning. Can you explain a little bit about your family's background and the dynamic relationship with food in your childhood home?
Sure. Well, when I was young, like under 11 years old, my family ate home cooked meals pretty regular. It was something that we always kind of sat down to the table. Then my dad died when I was 11 in an avalanche, and convenience became a greater focus in the household as far as what we ate. Think dollar cheeseburgers from McDonald's would get like 20 of them, or toaster strudels, or bagel bites. We were definitely trading convenience for connection with food, and that kind of went by the wayside during that time period. But in my teens, my mid-teens, I started getting more interested in like just cooking in general, to the point where whenever I was looking at going to college, I actually considered going to Le Cordon Bleu chef school. But my mom encouraged me to get a real degree, so that's what I did. But I was fortunate enough in college to have three really good friends that I lived with who today even are either chefs or cooks, and let's just say, like, the trope about college boys just like eating pizza, that definitely didn't exist in my college household. Like, on any given night, we were feeding like 15 to 20 people, and it was just an awesome experience. The whole experience from getting to eat good food that we all came together to make, and then feeding a bunch of people. That was something that I wouldn't trade for anything. It was such an amazing experience. But still, at this point, I wasn't really fully connected with our food system or anything like that. It was really just more about the cooking and preparing and the experience of sharing, breaking bread. And then at some point in college, I watched that documentary Food Inc., which really opened my eyes to, I guess I had maybe in the back of my mind known about some of these factory food operations, but I'd never actually like seen it and had it put in my face in the way that Food Inc. did. So that got me thinking. But I still wasn't at the point where I was applying any of that knowledge to my day to day, other than maybe trying to buy organic at the store or something like that. But then in my late 20s, I started thinking a little bit more about where my food came from, and I actually made the effort to buy raw milk, but I was still going to the grocery store and handing over dollars to faceless corporations for quote unquote organic food. Still very far away from my relationship with and the connection that I felt maybe innately I needed in my life. And so flash forward about 4 or 5 years, and I'm still in Texas looking for something different. But what was offered, and there just wasn't a culture of farmers markets and agriculture and that sort of thing in Southeast Texas. And, maybe in other parts of Texas, Austin area, and stuff like that, I could see maybe a culture of that sort, but definitely not where I was living. So, for a number of reasons, I kind of packed up my shit and headed to Montana. And on my drive up, I listened to the book Kiss the Ground. And so let me take a step back. Before I drove up, or before I moved, I was feeling pretty hopeless about humanity and the direction we're going as far as our food systems and its impact on the environment. And I kind of felt like we were in a car headed towards a cliff, and like nobody had any interest in pressing on the brakes, like just full steam ahead. And so anyway, I was feeling a little hopeless, but then I read Kiss the Ground, or I listened to it on audio on my drive. And that led me into Dirt to Soil and One Straw Revolution and a whole slew of other books that totally transformed my perception of the role of food in our communities as well as in our ecosystems, and how we are part of the ecosystem and we're not removed from it. And so what role do we want to be in that ecosystem? And so after, getting up to Montana, the first thing I did each summer was move out onto some sort of farming operation to basically just get my hands in the soil and learn as much as I could.
I think there are so many parts of your story that are going to resonate with our listeners. And I want to start with focusing on that childhood home. So, obviously, there was a dramatic shift following the passing of your father, the unexpected passing of your father. There was, as you've already communicated, an exchange for home cooked meals to convenient foods. And I think there is a bit of irony and even, I think, tragedy in the relationship there that so many experience, where food, which can be one of the very things that vitalize us and heal us, become just a source of quick and cheap fuel for the body and comfort. And that is in no way to denounce your mother for leaning towards those foods in a time of grief, but How did they change how you viewed food as a child? Do you remember when you made that switch, if you had any feelings around it?
No, I really don't. I mean, I think at that point, I just was not attuned to what was taking place, but only in reflection do I kind of see that, I guess.
Yeah, rightfully so. And I think you're fortunate to not have to developed the same kind of dependency on those foods that so many do in times of tragedy. I see now in our nation's culture this severe mental health epidemic, and so many people are relying on these cheap foods as a source of dopamine. And I know that kind of broke out of this convenient food culture in your college experience. Why is it that you began to take food seriously and cook with your friends? I know you discussed feeding the community. What was kind of the impetus for that?
Well, as I mentioned previously, it was in my mid-teens, so like high school when I started getting more interest in food. And my mom was a teacher, so oftentimes I would be the one that would make dinner for everybody, and I just really enjoyed doing that for everybody. I mean, my sisters and my mom. That was when I started like kind of getting that spark for making something for other people.
What does that bring for you when you prepare food for other people? What does that experience feel like?
Joy, realness, authenticity.
Say some more about that. How is preparing food, how does it bring you a sense of authenticity versus, let's say, grabbing a hamburger at a fast food restaurant with the same people?
Well, there's intention behind the food that's being prepared, especially today. I mean, and in high school, I didn't really think about where it came from, the food itself, and those sorts of things. But today, like I know, like where this cut of meat came from and where this zucchini came from, and I mean, it's night and day. There's the love and intention that goes into preparing a meal for somebody else.
I know that you've been highly influenced by the works of farmer and author Wendell Berry. He is renowned for his quote that eating is an agricultural act. How do you see that playing out in your own life and informing the choices that you make about food?
Well, eating is an agricultural act. I would go further and say that cooking for others is a political act. Every meal you make from scratch is a small rebellion against a system that profits from disconnection.
That's pretty powerful. That is an extension that I myself hadn't considered.
Yeah, so why do I think cooking is a political act? The reason is because you're making a choice to value community and sharing over convenience. And I guess we traded the meaningful work of feeding ourselves for convenience. And I don't think in general people have realized what we're giving up for that. And I'm just trying to take some of that back.
I think we are certainly a culture that is hooked on convenience. And that brings me into your personal decision not to own a microwave. Now, I know that we've talked about this before and you kind of chuckle, but it really is almost radical to eschew such commonplace technology now. So many people rely heavily on a microwave and don't know that there's even any other way. I know for me, meeting you and living with you that first summer in Montana radically changed how I view food preparation and food sourcing. And I know that I was almost in a sort of culture shock when you told me that you chose not to use or even own a microwave. For the vast majority, microwavable meals and similar convenience foods are a staple of the diet. So, how has excluding a microwave from your kitchen influenced the way that you connect with your meal and its preparation?
So let me first start by saying I'm not like anti microwave. You know, I get it. Like sometimes you don't have an hour to prepare a nice meal. But we've all been there. For me, the microwave it's like a dam between you and your food and the connection that you should have with food. It makes it so that you can just press a button and move on. You don't have to think about the process of preparing the food. I guess I don't want my relationship with food to be one of convenience. I want there to be some friction. I
Ooh.
want to be able to stand in my kitchen and actually be there with the food while the meal comes together. And I don't see that as a sacrifice. I see that as a gift that I give myself. I have that opportunity every day to create something amazing using all these ingredients that were created by somebody else with that same intention of doing something amazing. And I feel like when we trade the meaningful work of feeding ourselves for convenience, we give up a lot there.
I really like the word that you used to describe that, friction. Friction in our culture typically has somewhat of a negative connotation, right? It's the force or it's this sense of opposition between you and a desired outcome or desired relationship. But for you, it seems to be an act of slowing down, almost a ritual of honoring the source. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, I would say so. That's pretty accurate.
Do you see ways still in your preparation that friction could be negative?
Well, I don't know. I'll just say that friction often is the good stuff in life. So whether it's cooking a meal, growing a tomato, mending a shirt, walking to your neighbor's house, and these things take time and effort, and sometimes they could be considered inconvenience. I'd say every meaningful relationship requires friction. Raising a child, building a friendship, tending a garden. These things demand something of us, and they're interrupters in our schedules, and that's also like the spice of life. That's why we are, you know. And so to remove friction basically removes us from our own humanity.
I think that's so beautiful. And I even want to take that and transfer it to my own life right now in a way that might sound kind of silly to some of our listeners, but I promise I have a point with this. I have recently taken up bouldering, indoor bouldering in a rock climbing gym setting. And anytime I throw myself at a new route and I experience some of the friction that you're talking about, where the first problem starts to arise, it is so easy to get frustrated and say, I'm not ready for this challenge yet. When really, that self same friction can be encouraging to ask me to slow down and ask questions. What am I doing here that demands improvement? What here demands me to be better? How can I slow down my movement and generate some new skill sets from this particular obstacle? And I think that we can see that even in how you prepare food. Why do you think, as a culture, friction has become something to fear or evade?
Well, I would say time is a big component of that. A lot of people have convinced themselves that they don't have time to embrace something that might be more tedious, like cooking a meal. You know, if you don't have time to cook or you can't cook, they send you a meal kit. You don't have time to go to the grocery store, they deliver your groceries. You don't care to say hi to your neighbors because it's just, you know, one more thing that you have to do in that day. And I think a lot of it just comes down to time.
Well, there's so much when it comes to embracing the local food system that is uncomfortable, right? I think we have, especially on social media, so many images that are showing us just how positive the outcome is. And it is, undeniably. There is something so rewarding about eating locally produced food or food that you've even grown yourself. But I don't think we spend enough attention exploring just how challenging it can be for people outside of that system. There is friction to starting a new relationship with a farmer when you are used to living behind a screen. And there is friction to preparing a grass fed steak when you're used to eating a McDonald's hamburger. But I think the conclusion that we can draw from these instances is that there is a reward at the end. And I would deeply encourage our listeners to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in these new settings, particularly as it relates to food and food community.
Absolutely. I mean, just even a backyard barbecue is a good place to start. Sure, maybe you're not overly focused on where you're buying your food or any of those things, but I believe it really does begin with creating for others, and preparing food is one way to do that.
I think one of the difficulties that we run into when we start talking about slowing down our food preparation and getting closer to our food source is that so many underserved populations don't have the same luxury. And while it's a privilege of ours to strive towards these changes and to do what we can in our own lives, how do we serve some of these people who are falling through the cracks? Do you have any proposed solutions for a potential world where we can help provide others afford fresh food? Maybe those in a food apartheid, or even those who don't have the time to truly cook their meals in the midst of their busy schedule.
Sure. So first, let's be honest about what we're talking about here. So food apartheid isn't an accident. It's policy. It's redlining. It's subsidies that flow to corn and soy instead of vegetables. It's corporations building empires on the bodies of people who can't afford to eat well. So no, I'm definitely not going to sit here and tell a single mom working two jobs to just cook more. That's obscene, and the game is already pretty much rigged against her. But I think the answer is community, mutual aid, neighbors feeding neighbors, shared gardens, community kitchens, local food networks. These systems that operate outside of the extractive economy, I guess, that we live in today. Decades ago, we destroyed these local food systems with machinery and industrialization, and we've lost these skills of like food prep, food preservation, growing food, raising food, etc. We've lost a lot of these skills. Back in the 30s, something like 25% of the population were farmers. Today, it's less than 2%. And so uh, that alone is a huge shift in our direct connection with the land and with food.
What troubles you the most about our present food system?
Well, I'd say that the disconnection again of food and person and land, it's not a bug, it's a feature of our current system. These corporations don't want you to know where your food comes from. They don't want you asking questions. They want you passive and compliant and reaching for whatever's cheap and convenient. I think that that's very dangerous, and we are starting to see changes. I don't think that it's enough fast enough at this point, but there are positive markers out there as far as the whole regenerative ag movement. And, as much as I despise social media, because everyone's carrying a camera around, there's lots of opportunities to expose the atrocities that are taking place in some of these CAFOs and those sorts of things.
As well as, I would add, to learn.
Yeah.
There's so much information at our fingertips now and so many valuable resources that are here to help spark this change and maybe show how to use some of these ingredients. So, what hope do you have for the future of food?
Well, I think that our existing food system needs to be replaced. I don't think it can be augmented to reach, I think, what our goal should be, which is communities that are capable of feeding themselves. So, right now in Montana, we're doing a 33 by 33 initiative, which is essentially trying to get Montanans to consume 30% of their daily intake from Montana produced food. And we are actively trying to live what I think the future of food should be here at Orion Farmstead. We're putting up a farm stand. We're going to be sourcing locally. It's going to be an opportunity for people in this community, rural community, to not have to drive over an hour to be able to get good food. And I think the more we can improve access and also educate, I think the better off we will be as a society.
I'm right there with you. And this farm stand, I think, has the potential to really do a lot of good in our community here in Ovando, Montana. And I think it's a shocking reality for a lot of people when they hear that folks in rural communities are in just as much of a food apartheid as some that are living in urban areas. Food deserts are real and they even affect our rural areas. So, if we're going to move towards this goal of living in a nation where nutritious food, is more accessible, we have to consider all communities. And Orion Farmstead is really honored to be a part of that movement forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pumped. I can't
Hey,
wait to shop at my own farm stand.
yeah, that's going to be pretty boss, huh? How does
Yeah.
your connection to food and the food system help you to feel rooted?
I moved a lot when I was young, spent most of my life, I guess, uprooted, if you will. Kind of consider myself somewhat nomadic, but perhaps I was searching for something I couldn't name in a place that couldn't give it to me. So I feel like our industrial society kind of wants us to be mobile and interchangeable and disconnected because it makes it easier to sell to us and it makes us easier to control. By purchasing or growing my own food, I'm providing agency to myself, to my local farmer. I'm getting high quality food and I'm developing a stronger connection with my community and with the land that that food comes from. I think with what we're doing at Orion and regenerative agriculture, permaculture, if you will, is we are trying to develop a permanent culture of community oriented food systems. There's probably a lot of people out there that don't really know where to start if they do want to maybe deepen their relationship with food and land and place. But I'd say a good place to start is the farmer's market. And you've got to be careful when you go to the farmer's market, just like when you go to the store. There are some bad apples out there that try to pass off homegrown produce and stuff like that that they just bought from some Cisco or Costco or whatever. And they didn't actually grow it themselves, and it's probably been grown in some environment that is industrial and so on and so forth. So you have to ask questions. I'd say when you go to the market, you have a conversation with the person that you might be buying the food from and get a sense. So, if they are bad apple, they're probably not just going to outright tell you that they're buying their stuff from Cisco or something like that. But the ones that are truly cultivating that food, they will be able to relate. They'll be able to share an experience. You'll be able to share an experience with them that is authentic and it's authentic. And so I'd say continue down that path as far as you can take it and then maybe find another opportunity to reconnect. Maybe grow something in your windowsill, like some herbs. Even these small things bring you one step closer to a deepening connection with food and lands.
Alexis, you have prepared countless meals for me and even some of my very close friends that have visited with me, and that has been a true honor. I think it's pretty special that the first time I ever drank raw milk was with you in Montana when I was 22. We bought it from like some bargain Amish store. It was like a thrift store for the Amish, and they happened to have raw milk, so that was pretty special.
Good
And
old Alice.
good old Alice the milk cow, providing as she always does. And the first time I had grass fed beef was with you. And these are memories. These are real memories that people can be making and connections that they will remember and that will endure. I think Orion Farmstead is here to help facilitate some of those same experiences. So, for anyone listening that is interested in pursuing this type of connection with the local food system, I highly encourage you to check out our website. I'm going to have the link posted here in the show notes. Please join our newsletter, follow us on social media, as well as continue to tune into this podcast because we're going to keep covering topics such as this. We're going to have experts from the field. It's not always going to be Alexis and myself here. We're going to have people from all walks of life sharing these same experiences because food is universal and so should the solution be to this current food crisis. Alexis, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your vision in founding Orion Farmstead and taking the time to be vulnerable and share your food journey.
My pleasure, Ashton. We'll see you out there. Yeah.